Hi everyone. Today we have a session on GraphQL and REST API. In this session, we will cover these are the agenda. What is REST API? What is GraphQL? REST API versus GraphQL. Advantage of GraphQL. Disadvantage of GraphQL. REST API. REST API basically this is the architecture style. The REST API we exposing the multiple endpoint REST in the data fetching, it's sometime happening overfetching or underfetching. So this is the example that you can see in the REST API. We exposing the multiple endpoint. For the saving, we have another endpoint for fetching the record for another API or fetching all record. We have another API. Basically, for the CURD operation, we writing the multiple API for get, update, put, or want to fetch all the record for basically we writing the different endpoint for that in now into the GraphQL. What is GraphQL? GraphQL basically this is a query language. It was developed by the Facebook in 2012 and it get open source in 2015. And GraphQL is not a replacement of the REST API. REST API basically that is the architecture style, and GraphQL is a query language over the API. In the GraphQL, we exposing only one endpoint. Like in the REST API, if you remember, we exposing for the multiple endpoint for the code operation, or maybe depends upon client requirement. We're creating the endpoint. So GraphQL. The GraphQL says if define a schema and data type. First in the GraphQL, so what we have to do, we have to define the schema and the data type. And I tell in GraphQL, basically we exporting the only one endpoint, the client query over the data on the same endpoint. So something like we defining the data type in the schema. So here you can see write some type query that is this will return all the book, and this get book will be return the only one book. And here you can see some this is query the mutation basically the query is used for the fetching the data, mutation for the updation or deletion or saving the data using the mutation. So for the say book, we have a uh, one data type declaration that we have, and the book type object what will be the attribute and the book, and author type we have either name, and we define the data type string, float, and the object type language that we have in the string or array. And if you're writing the query, client will write the query something like the query. There have the get book, something we have, and here the client will pass. So client will request the data whatever they want, and client want to fetch ID, title, status of the book from the book type. They will request for that attribute, and client will get the response in that format. So you can see here in this image that we have. So difference between the REST API and GraphQL. GraphQL is a query language that is said in the REST API architecture style. It's client driven, it's server side driven. Deployment over GraphQL is happening over the HTTP using the single endpoint. Deployment over UR where each of them expose single resources. Lack of automatic caching mechanism, and that is the problem in GraphQL, but that we can achieve by using so many APIs available. API as libraries available, through that you can achieve this problem in the GraphQL. Using caching, uses caching automatically in REST API is happening. Client side which resource and which field data want to fetch. Client decide here what are the data they want to fetch from the uh, uh, API with, and the REST API. In REST API, developer decide which field to be exposed on the endpoint. Uh, the GraphQL client can decide our REST API, our fetching, under fetching, the big problem in the REST API. GraphQL only post method can support for the query or mutation. In REST, all methods support get, put, delete. These are the method. The all methods get supported by the REST API. Advantage: GraphQL expose single endpoint, so we know worry about to know the endpoint and the response body, what will be the response body, and so this is phasing on and GraphQL exposure only one endpoint. GraphQL solve both overfetching and underfetching problem. Like the GraphQL, what we doing? Client decide what are the field they want to take, and REST, if you remember, developer decide what are the field should be exposed in the over the endpoint. So client, let's want to show the book name, just he will pass the name or name attribute, and client will get the book only. Client want to show the price of book, author of book, chapter of the book. Client just pass all the attribute on inside the um, body. They will get all the attributes. Development is get much faster with the GraphQL. So here client decide what are the data they require whenever they will decide. So no need for the development. So definitely development will get very fast. Developer have to define the schema, data type. Since the client now have more freedom in the data. Yes, definitely client whenever they want to fetch, whatever the attribute want to fetch, they can decide. Disadvantage: file upload that can be not be cannot be done using the GraphQL. Error handling is very difficult. Always return 200. Where if it is success or failure, always you will get the 200 in the GraphQL. Slow system because client privileges for privileges for the data request. Difficult to tuning the data query.